can you explain what psychosocial risk is and why it's so important? I guess in this contemporary post-COVID world where work seems to be a greater discussion than it has ever before, and why it would be really helpful for people to understand, I guess, just before we dive into the bulk of the PhD.
Yeah, absolutely. So forgive me, but I'm going to have to drop in a few different terms here. So before we get to the idea of psychosocial risk, it's a way of looking at and sort of almost assessing work. There's a concept called the psychosocial work environment, and this is basically, it describes the way that work is inherently designed, organized, and managed. So the factors that make that up. So, what is your workload like? What is the content of your work? How fast do you have to work? What sort of support do you have available in terms of your colleagues and your managers? What are the other interpersonal relationships like? How much control do you have over what you do? How emotionally demanding is your work? These are all examples of what we call psychosocial factors. So it's the idea, these factors make up the psychosocial work environment, like the factor of workload, for example. It's not good or bad, it just is. You have workload of some type. It may be high, it may be low. Now, psychosocial risk comes in when these factors are experienced by the individual worker in a negative way. So I just mentioned, workload is one factor. It may be high, it may be low. Now, actually, having really, really high workload can pose a psychosocial hazard. But what is high workload to you? You may thrive with high workload, I may not. Equally, just the same, really low workload and being really understimulated and bored at work can also pose a psychosocial hazard. And I guess just to draw a parallel, it's helpful to think of psychosocial risks, if you will, alongside the more kind of obvious work risks. So people working with chemicals, we know, particularly from the pandemic, our healthcare workers, there were really severe biological risks. We know if we walk in a work site and see a shelf that looks like it's about to topple over, physical risk, or we know slumping over our computer, that's an ergonomic risk. So psychosocial risk is the idea that just as those things can and do cause harm, so too can the way that work is designed and organised and managed.
And it feels like this discussions around this area, at least from my subjective perspective, seems to be happening more and more and more. But why your PhD is so helpful is to actually try and understand what is going on, rather than just thinking, am I happy in my workplace? Am I unhappy in my workplace? Am I overstressed? Am I overtired? I think a lot of conversations are being had around these fringes by people that may not understand, specific examples of what is healthy work, what is not healthy work, why is that the case? And I remember when we spoke to you the first time, I'm probably paraphrasing, but you said something along the lines of less pizza parties and more actual helpful frameworks. And I was like, that's exactly it. The amount of stories I've heard of, food just trying to be the answer to all problems, while many people, including myself, enjoy a pizza party, it's not conducive to actually making meaningful change in workplaces in Aotearoa.
Exactly. No, I could get up on a soapbox about this for hours, and I do love pizza myself. I can demolish a whole one myself, and will that help in my work? Quite possibly. But I guess a really good comparison to draw there is pizza parties, Fitbits, free fruit in the lunchroom, dare I say it, mindfulness training, resilience training. These things may help, but they are all individual measures. It's, we're going to equip you to be a more resilient worker so you can withstand the challenges of this work environment. It's like, hang on, mate, why don't we try to take it to a higher level? Why are we just trying to target the individual, make the individual, more resilient, get the individual to do some mindfulness exercises when they feel work is getting stressful. The psychosocial work environment concept, it tries to address those things at a higher level, saying, can we redesign work to actually not have these hazards in the first place? Now, a disclaimer, I'm absolutely not rubbishing mindfulness or resilience or any of those things. And if that works for an individual, awesome, amazing, absolutely do that. But I guess from the employer perspective, I'm just going to go out there and say it's a lazy approach if that's all you're doing and you're not trying to look at things at a higher level and make more widespread change to work and the impact it has on your workers.
Thanks for watching this episode preview from Season 3 of PhD Unpacked. For full episodes, find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all other listening platforms. And for more content and tidbits, check out PhD Unpacked on TikTok and Instagram.